Hi, everyone. Welcome to this season of Virtual Meetups, which is all about movement ecology. It's part of our Tracking Progress project. Before we get into the meetup, we're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping while we're still getting a lot of people joining. Welcome. Please use the chat as always to say hello, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from and why you're interested in this topic. Just so you're aware, during presentations, we'd love for you to use the chat to ask questions, to comment, to share links and resources and interact with each other. If you ask a question, we will take note of it. Just drop it in the chat and we'll keep track of everyone and call on you in the Q&A and in the discussion. But please, when you ask a question, can you please say if you have a microphone or not, because our preference will be to call on you and have you join in the discussion and use your own voice. If you don't have a microphone, that's totally fine. I'll read out your questions for you, but just please let us know what you need us to do. During the Q&A, so what we're going to have today, a virtual meetup, we'll have 4 speakers. After each speaker, we're going to have a short period of time for Q&A directly with that speaker. And once we're through the final speaker, we'll ask the panel to join us all together and have an open facilitated discussion, which will last probably half an hour, 45 minutes. During the Q&A and open discussion sections, if I call on you, can you please turn on your mic and video to join in the discussion? You're also welcome to ask a follow-up question, but just be aware if your discussion gets too technical, I'll probably redirect you into the chat where the speakers and other participants can pick up and answer your more technical questions. And finally, we run these sort of events, Tech Tutors, virtual meetups. All of our events are intended to create spaces to bring our community together. And so if you meet someone in the chat that you want to be connected with and want to follow up after the session with, and you don't get the chance to exchange contact details, please just drop us an email. It comes to me. We'll check if the other person is happy to swap contact details and connect you so you can follow up with them. So we're here to listen to some great talks, to have a really good discussion, but we're also here to talk to each other and connect. So please do take advantage of that as well. If you have technical issues, I mean, we all should be familiar enough with Zoom now, I think, but our first recommendation is to just try leaving Zoom and coming back in. If you are actually having more issues, please direct message Talia Speaker, find her in the participant list. She'll be able to help you out, or drop her an email at taliaspeaker@WILDLABS.NET and she'll be able to sort things out. And finally, because this event is part of a larger research project, we have to run through some ethics and consent information. So this is a project we're running in partnership with Colorado State University and supported by the Moore Foundation, and it's intended to conduct a horizon scan of tech in movement ecology. This event is being recorded and we will post it to our YouTube channel and onto Wild Labs within the next few days. But it will be shared publicly and used to inform future elements of this research. And by staying on this call, you're consenting to participate in this discussion and our research project. So please be aware. And if you don't consent, you are also free to leave. But if you have further questions, just drop Jen or Talia an email. Right, that's it for housekeeping. But as this is the first event in this season, we wanted to give you a little bit of background about actually what this project is. And we're really excited about it. Our team's been working on this for probably about a year now. And it's basically a collaboration between Wild Labs and the Moore Foundation. And Tracking Progress is this research project where we're trying to bring together our community and the experts in the field to conduct a horizon scan of movement ecology and ask the question of where investment is needed to catapult this field forward. How this project's running is that we have 4 public events, the first one being today, all about data collection. The next one will be about data analysis in 2 weeks, and we've just opened registration if you'd like to join us. Our third event will cover data sharing and archiving, and our final event will cover future questions and tools. So we hope you'll come along and participate in these discussions and help explore these topics with us and give your perspectives and explore where investment is needed. And just to give you some context about what we're thinking about when we talk about investment and talk about innovation, we're thinking about these on multiple time horizons, and reading through all of the responses you guys gave as you were registering. We asked some questions, and a lot of the responses seem to, when we asked about, what questions you wanted answered and what would transform the field, a lot of the answers focused on specific things that we probably almost know how to solve already, and we just need to throw funding and basically brute force behind them. And those are the things that are sitting on that second horizon, where it's basically like trying to reduce the size of transmitters or improve battery life or improve cost. Like we're not underestimating the challenges that solving these challenges will require, but we're also would like to encourage you to think on a bigger time horizon and a bigger picture as well, and think about this third horizon where, putting the practical things aside, where could this field be going, and what questions could the technology help us ask, and how could technology innovation jump forward so that we can, where could we be going in 5, 10, 15 years, this more blue sky thinking. So as we're having these discussions and you're thinking and participating, just keep in mind these multiple horizons we're talking about, like the brute force, immediate questions and challenges we need to solve, but also where could we be going if we were to leapfrog forward. And just to give you a little bit of context about where these virtual meetups sit within the bigger project, for the last 6 months, year, and the background research, we've pulled together a fantastic advisory committee and partners at the Moore Foundation and done our own work to do a literature review and define these 4 focus areas. We're now in the stage where we're getting the community input and hosting these virtual meetups and these public discussions to try and source all of these topics that we will search through in our horizon scan to prioritize areas for investment. The next stage of this project will be some smaller focus groups with invited experts. And then finally, we will do a sort through with our advisory group of the highest priorities for where investment is needed. So the output of this, we are always committed to sharing, when we bring the community together and like in our state of conservation tech research, when we ask you guys to be involved in our work, we're committed to sharing back all of the information that you give us, and the output from this will be an academic publication and other materials, and we'll share back all of the information you give with us. So keep an eye out in the next 6-12 months as we move through this project. We'll keep you advised. Now, it's enough background from me. I would love to welcome our 4 speakers today and thank them all. They're all in very awkward time zones. I think 2 of our speakers are at 6 a.m. and Yuuki, it's 10 p.m. So we're really pleased to have you all here and really excited to hear from you. First, we're going to hear from Roland Kays, who's going to give us an overview of the topic. It'll be a quick 5-minute talk. Then Melinda's going to speak, followed by Yuuki Watanabe and Vikram Iyer. So each speaker will speak for 10 minutes, then we'll have a short amount of time for questions, and then we'll have the open discussion. So I'm going to hand over to Roland now. Nice.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, looks good.
Stephanie.
Perfect.
And, hi, everybody. My name is Roland Kays from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and North Carolina State University. Happy to kind of be the appetizer for today, as Stephanie said, kind of a quick introduction to the topic, and then we can get into the main course. And also a little bit of history and maybe kind of ancient history, right? This is this was me back in 1995, tracking animals, right? Running around in the forest, looking for VHF pings. And after a year of following these kinkajous around, I was able to get a few hundred locations on these animals. And this was a lot of hard work, and I was very proud of this, and wrote some papers, and we learned some stuff about kinkajous from this work. But that was a lot of work for really not that much data. Fast forward, I had the fortune of working with kinkajous again, and this time with GPS tracking data, of course, and you get these really rich tracks. So this is showing just a couple months of one animal with these incredible corridors within their home range. And we can plot this on top of other data. In this case, the colors on the map are showing canopy height. And so just a lot more rich information. And we can also look at this over time, right? So this is a space-time cube for the same kinkajou, where the z-axis is time and the color is showing different behaviors. And so much more information, so much more insight into these animal lives from these rich data sets. And so I think a lot of us get excited by the promise of more data, right? We have more details, we get it much quicker, but there's also a lot of peril because these data are hard to manage. They fill up your hard drive, they take a long time to transmit, and the analyses, not only are the data are big, but the analytics are getting more and more complicated. And so we're not the first field to encounter these challenges, of course. This is a lot of science is going this way. And they sort of characterize some of the challenges of big data, and I'll sort of put these on the wildlife side, right? We're now dealing often with millions and sometimes even with billions of data points. And there's also a huge variety, right? It's not just animal tracking. There's lots of other spatial ecology related information that we can get about the animals we're studying and about the world that they're moving through. So that complicates things. And then we need to verify, right? We need to make sure that we're dealing with good quality data. Are the species, in the photograph identified correctly? Was the animal really there, or was there GPS error with the locations? These kinds of things. And then in terms of velocity, right, live data is coming in more and more. In MoveBank now, I think we're getting about 3 million data points. Well, you guys who are using MoveBank are bringing in 3 million data points a day. That was from a couple months ago, so it's probably even more now. And then also, are we taking advantage of this live data? Are we able to get insights from the data that's coming in real time, or does it just accumulate and then 4 years later we actually get around to analyze it? So I think these are some of the challenges that we need to overcome related to the big data side of wildlife data. But the fortunate thing is the opportunities are really exciting, and I think I've heard it sort of said that we're in the golden age of animal tracking, and I think we are, and I'm excited to hear what the next speakers have to say on their perspectives on moving forward on data collection for movement ecology. So that's my 5 minutes or so.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Roland. Melinda, do you want to jump in and take over?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, and everyone else who made this meetup possible. And great, thank you, Roland, for a really good tee up for my talk. Can everybody see my screen at the moment?
Yes.
Is it okay? Okay, great. So my name's Melinda Holland, and I am with a company called Wildlife Computers. I've been with them for over 30 years. And during this time, the enabling technology to be able to design and build instruments that could be deployed on free-ranging animals has really grown in ways that we couldn't imagine back then. So I'm going to give a brief overview of how tags for animals collect the data, transmit the information, and I'll be focusing on satellite telemetry. So tags incorporate low power sensors that stabilize really quickly to collect the data. The amount of data, as Roland mentioned, has grown immensely over the years. So onboard processors orchestrate the data collection and the storage of the data in archives on board the tags. And in the case of satellite tags, there is event detection and compression routines that transform the data into information packets or messages that can actually be transmitted to the satellites. These satellite systems then downlink the data, the received transmissions to the data centers, where the packets of data are decoded, fused with other applicable information, and then made available to the end user. Back in the 1980s, when the Argo satellite system was developed, it was unique in that it could support the constraints of marine animal applications. These constraints are global coverage was necessary, especially over the oceans. The transmitters had to be low power, so the size and weight of the package could be as small as possible to limit the impact on the animal behavior. The other key thing is it does not require lengthy handshakes. Marine animal surfacing time may be 1 second or less. However, to meet these constraints, the data throughput is really limited. Even today, it's just a maximum of 31 bytes per transmission, and the satellite coverage is dependent upon latitude. We currently have 7 Argo satellites in orbit right now. However, the advances in technology and the Internet of Things, or IoT, has driven the satellite industry to develop other competing satellite constellations. These use the smaller, much less expensive nanosatellites. And because of their size and lower cost, it is now economically feasible for these companies to build larger constellations. We're hearing about constellations with 20, 30, 40, even hundreds of nanosatellites. It's going to get crowded up there. But what this means for us is there's the ability to have more satellite coverage, a shortened latency between the reception of the information packet and the availability to the end user. This means we're getting closer to real-time reception and analysis of data that are collected. And a number of these satellite systems are nearing operational status. 2 that we've been following closely are called Astrocast and Lacuna Space. And Lacuna Space incorporates the highly used LoRa technology that's deployed on terrestrial applications. Even Argos is evolving their older satellite receivers to be small enough to be carried on nanosatellites. This is a slightly older slide. One of the larger 8 satellites has been decommissioned, so we currently have 7, as I mentioned. But in 2023, we should be having a constellation of 25 satellites. I'm still a little bit hesitant that they're going to hit the 2023 launch time because you think these things always tend to be delayed, but we're really hopeful. So by 2023, 24, 25, we're going to have these multiple satellite systems available for us to use. However, due to animal behavior, remember I mentioned that marine animals only surface briefly, and the power constraints, the size of the messages that we will be able to transmit will remain small. But right now, the microprocessors and the ability to, the techniques to analyze large volumes of data has increased incredibly rapidly. There are more powerful deterministic algorithms, and AI ML is now being deployed on analyzing data that are collected on board from animal tags. So a second horizon framework goal would be to incorporate these existing technologies, the more powerful processors and the more sophisticated algorithms on board the tag itself, so that we can actually transmit more information via whatever satellite system we use. And then on the third horizon, I believe that the tag architecture needs to be what we're calling telemetry agile. We don't know what the next telemetry system will be it satellite, ground-based, or a combination of both. So in order to take full advantage of these systems, the various tags that exist, and there are just hundreds and hundreds of models out there, not only created by our company, but others like Sea Mammal Research Unit, Microwave Telemetry, Hornets, that's just a few, who do create for commercial availability that we could just provide to the community. These all need to be transformed to be telemetry agile. And this is going to be a challenge as the technology is just evolving right under our feet. And with that, I hope I'm within my 10 minutes and want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. We had a couple of questions. Aki, I know yours got answered by Danny, but do you want to jump in and ask it here? Aki?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yeah. How you doing?
Hi, thank you. I'm curious to know what kind of platforms that are being used, NoSQL versus SQL service, because the use cases of how you store the data, that's the first challenge in handling big data. Thank you.
I'm sorry, you're saying how the data are stored on board the tag or in the data systems, the data centers? On board the tag, we don't have the ability to use tools such as SQL yet. So we do store the data in a compressed raw format. And then we have specific routines that leverage the power of the silicon on the microprocessors to perform the analysis. So when you do have analysis routines that are developed for, say, desktop or cloud-based computing, those need to be translated to use the microprocessors, the instruction data set, if you will, that's available for the onboard processors.
All right, I'm going to throw to Thomas. Do you want to jump in now?
Sure. My question is fairly straightforward. Just I'm wondering that it seems like onboard processors seem like a great tool for a lot of these data-rich things like accelerometers and magnetometers. But I'm just wondering what the power implications are.
That's what's evolving so rapidly. These lower power sensors, both the accelerometers, magnetometers, and the microprocessors are becoming available. And this is driven by industry. The Internet of Things is requiring that as well. So a class of microprocessors that we've been looking at are called ARM. And again, their physical size and power requirements have really, really dropped compared, well, don't even need to go back 30 years just from the processors we used 10 years ago.
Okay, there was another question about data standards, but I'm actually going to hold that for the group discussion because it's like, I think it's something for the full panel and possibly for future meetups as well. So thank you very much, Melinda. We'll call you back after our other two speakers. Yuuki, do you want to jump in?
Yes. Can you show my slide?
Yes, looks perfect.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for your introduction. My name is Yuuki Watanabe at the National Institute of Polar Research, Japan. So today I'd like to talk about the potential of biologging or animal tracking tool as a tool for foraging ecology. Foraging ecology is a fundamental area in ecology. There are generally three methods to study foraging ecology. The most basic method is observation with binoculars, pencil, and notebook. The second method is stomach content or scat analysis. The third method is chemical analysis, such as stable isotope ratio analysis. I propose the fourth method, which is biologging with camera tags. So biologging method can complement these three conventional methods. I am showing two examples. penguin and seals. Back in 2010, we attached biologging devices, including video camera, to Adelie penguin in Antarctica. These animals were known to eat krill, but not known how they catch krill or how often they catch krill. So I'm showing the footage of a penguin catching krill filmed by that penguin. So this is very fast. So please watch carefully. Please imagine that you were a penguin. Finished. So now I'm playing the same film in a slow speed. So this shadow is a krill. So we got amazing footage, but the problem is that recording duration of our camera was only 90 minutes, limited by batteries. So we linked the foraging event seen in the footage to behavioral signal of foraging event recorded by other biologging devices, acceleration in this case. So this graph shows a dive of a penguin. Signals on the bottom are potential foraging event detected as acceleration signals. Answer on the bottom is real foraging event shown by video camera. As you can see, signals are not perfect, but pretty good. So once signals were validated, we were able to extend signal analysis to the whole acceleration data, which covers the entire foraging trip of penguin. In this way, we were able to monitor when, how, and what kind of prey penguin hunt in the water. This method allowed us to examine an ecosystem level question, which is the effect of sea ice on penguin populations. We had multiple field seasons with contrasting sea ice conditions. As you can see on the left, our field site is normally surrounded by extensive sea ice, and penguins travel by walking on the ice and find cracks for diving. However, as you can see on the right, we had an unusual field season in 2016 to 2017 when almost all sea ice was gone. Penguins traveled by swimming in this season. So this change is due to local weather conditions rather than global warming, but this is a kind of natural experiment where we could examine the effect of global warming. So using biologging, we found a very clear effect of sea ice. In the season without sea ice, the range of penguin foraging trip expanded because swimming is faster than walking. Primary production in the sea increased because sunlight directly came to the water. Foraging efficiency of penguin increased as determined by the combination of video camera and accelerometers. Consequently, breeding success of penguin increased. So quite surprisingly, the lack of sea ice had very strong and positive effect of penguin population in our study area. So in the next few decades, penguin population are expected to increase as sea ice declines due to global warming, at least in our study area. However, we acknowledge that Antarctica is a huge continent, and the effect of sea ice may be different among regions due to local conditions. Next example is Baikal seals in Lake Baikal, Russia. Baikal seals are world's only freshwater seal species. Lake Baikal is a UNESCO's World Heritage with full of endemic species, perhaps comparable to Galapagos. So this drawing is a general view of Lake Baikal food web. As you can see, Baikal seals on the top are considered as fish eaters. In 2018, we conducted biologging studies and found that this food web is not correct. Baikal seals eat not only fish, but also one trophic level below, which is Macroheptopus, which is a tiny endemic pelagic amphipod. So I'm now showing the video footage filmed by a seal. So this is, again, very fast. So watch it carefully. Please imagine that you are a seal. So seals are eating something very small. You can see seals are eating not fish, but this one, tiny amphipod. As we did for penguins, we linked the foraging event seen in the footage to simultaneously recorded behavioral data. This graph shows a dive and seal captured 154 amphipods during the bottom phase, according to the video footage. Body acceleration shown on the bottom worked as a behavioral signal of amphipod capture event. Overall, my analysis found that Baikal seals caught more than 50 amphipods per dive and more than 4,000 amphipods per day. Because amphipods are so tiny, Baikal seals have to catch many of them one by one. Our big surprise was that we also found that Baikal seals have unique teeth, which are apparently specialized for catching amphipods. As you can see, their teeth are like a filter with many small gaps. My interpretation is that to catch amphipods, Baikal seals open the mouth in the water thousands of times per day, and each time water comes in. So Baikal seals can expel water through the gaps of their teeth while retaining amphipod. So in this way, Baikal seals can eat thousands of amphipods without drinking excessive amount of water. Of course, there are many other studies showing the link between foraging behavior and foraging morphology, but our finding is unique because we got biologging data first, and based on the video observation, I checked the teeth morphology of Baikal seals initially on Google and was very, very surprised. So here is summary. I think there is a large potential of biologging as a tool for foraging ecology. Biologging gives time-stamped information of foraging event along with detailed animal behavior. So this method can complement conventional methods such as stomach contents analysis and stable isotope ratio analysis. As I showed for Adelie penguin and Baikal seals, this method helps us to examine ecosystem level questions. However, there are still much room for technological improvement, especially for camera tags. The biggest issue I have is that the method works fine for endothermic species, such as mammals and birds, but not ectothermic species, such as fish. Because foraging events of fish are so infrequent, it's difficult to film. So smart camera, such as acceleration triggered camera, will be a big help for applying this method to a wide range of animals. So thank you very much.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Yuuki. We have a question from our registration we thought you might be able to answer. And it was A. Robson asking, what do ecologists and conservationists need from technology in the future, and what are their challenges? And you just talked about the accelerations triggered cam being a critical innovation that you could see, but are there any others?
Yeah, I think there are many other improvements, such as first of all, camera is too big for many species currently, so the camera must be made much smaller, and also recording duration is also very short, and also filming under the darkness can be problem. So there are many room for improvement.
And you seem to be combining a lot of pieces of data. What was one piece of data that you didn't think you'd need, but then later on became really useful to answer a research question?
I'm always interested in the acceleration data, which have many different type of information. So it's sometimes I found very useful. I found acceleration very useful later in my analysis.
Zedulu, I'm not sorry if I said your name incorrectly. Do you want to jump in and ask this question?
Yes. Hi, Yuuki. I was just wondering, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Interesting talk, Yuuki. And I was just curious to know about you mentioned somewhere the acceleration based, triggered cameras. Like, can you put more lights into that technology being deployed, or you're just planning or anything like that?
Yes, as far as I know, my colleague Yasuhiko Naito and Dan Costa made such camera and put them on elephant seals. So the basically because the recording duration of video is normally very limited by battery, so they must save battery. So such camera acceleration triggered camera have accelerometer on board, and they can triggered by acceleration signal, which is a foraging signal, and then film efficiently the period of foraging. So there are such camera already, and but only very small people are using, and I'm very interested in using such technology.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mark, do you want to jump in?
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
That was really fascinating. Thank you for giving that talk. I'm curious, besides the size difference of the camera for maybe looking at a lot of passerines and other perching birds that keep their heads on a semi-perpendicular axis compared to their body, how would you go about doing this sort of thing for species like that?
You mean that what is the question?
Oh, sorry. So like a lot of birds that when
Yes.
they're foraging, their head is on a perpendicular angle to the rest of their spine and their body when they're foraging. And so how would you attach and position the camera to get that sort of footage? Let's assume that the camera
there are many problems specific to species. I can understand. Unfortunately for penguins, there's no such problem. But I attach camera to many species of sharks, but sharks have a mouth on the belly side, so it's very difficult to film. So I have no clear answer for that, but there are many such problems.
Thank you.
Harold, do you want to jump in?
Hi, Yuuki. Thanks for the talk. Very interesting, and I love all the video. I wonder, since the action happens so very quickly, how do you balance the frame rate of your video with the and the resolution against the battery consumption and so on? Thank you.
Thank you. So the camera I use is not very high resolution, and I cannot remember the number, but it's a research purpose, so I don't need very high resolution. And sampling frequency is, as far as I remember, it's about 30 frame per second. So to me, it's good enough. I don't need very high resolutions.
Thank you very much.
Final question from Tobias, who doesn't have a mic, so will be him. Says this is very interesting. Did you generalize the recorded patterns backed by video evidence to apply them on ACC only measurements over a longer period, like model training?
What I did is more basic. I didn't use model training. I made some signal. I made some signal and check by eye one by one.
Okay, Tobias, did that answer your question? Yuuki can pick up with you in the chat if not. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Yuuki. We'll bring you back in a few minutes. Okay, he says yes. Perfect. We're going to hand over to our final speaker now, Vikram. Do you want to take over and jump on in?
Yeah, sounds great. Let me just get my slides up. Let's see, I want this one. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. I just want to bring the chat up as well so I can see that. Yeah, so my name is Vikram, and I'm an assistant professor in the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering here at the University of Washington. And I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the work that we've been doing on biologging technologies at insect scale and some of the exciting opportunities and challenges here. And so, you know, if we think about lots of the animals around us, you know, we've got tiny creatures like pollinators, bees, that we really have absolutely no tools to be able to study, right? These are little animals that can carry less than a gram of weight and are often less than a centimeter in size, but still play pretty important roles in ecosystems. And also, if we think about even, or looking beyond just insects, if we look at many bird species, they can also carry very, very limited amounts of weight. So for example, this plot here shows a variety of different bird species with their mass plotted on the x-axis versus the number of species on the y-axis. And what we can see here is there's this really large concentration of species that weigh around 10 grams. And considering birds can only carry 3 to 5% of their body weight, this puts a maximum for our electronics payload at you know, only 300 to 500 milligrams. And miniaturizing electronics for even smaller species like hummingbirds that can only carry 100 to 200 milligrams becomes even more challenging. And so, you know, and looking beyond just some of the existing tag technologies that are measuring location, there's a lot more that we could do if we could integrate other types of sensors as well. Like Yuuki just talked about, if we can integrate things like cameras and accelerometers onto these little tags, there's lots of other data that we could collect to answer all kinds of different interesting questions. And so a lot of my recent work has been on integrating Internet of Things technologies into different kinds of animal tracking applications. So a few highlights here include a 100 milligram sensing platform that was small enough to ride on the back of a live bumblebee. That's the first picture that you see here. We've also done some work that was used to track and study invasive murder hornets that were found here in Washington State. And the last is a tiny wireless vision system, actually a little camera and accelerometer that was small enough to fit on the back of a live beetle. And the common approach that runs through all of these systems is actually to use general purpose computing devices, the same sorts of little computing chips that are found in things like your wireless headphones and other devices, which, as Melinda mentioned before, have been getting much more and more capable to actually build these without creating entirely new custom silicon, which really allows us to enable rapid prototyping and adapting these systems to lots of different types of applications. Yeah, and so I want to get started here first by looking a little more detail at the wireless sensors that we put on these. Are my slides advancing here? Let me see.
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah. Give me just a second. Oh. All right, there we go. Yeah, so the motivation behind this project was actually, could we use live insects to carry wireless sensors in, say in places like farms, to be able to actually study environmental conditions rather than using a drone to carry around a sensor. And what we ended up doing was, oh, there we go. So if I can get the video to play here. We actually have a little there we go. We've got a little wireless wireless transmitter on the back of this live bumblebee, and it's carrying in this case a temperature and humidity sensor. We could also put other kinds of sensors on this as well. And the big challenges here are really developing for extremely small size and really low power for all of our electronics. And one of the types of weights that we're talking about here is we used a battery that weighs about 70 milligrams, and so then all of our electronics have to weigh around 30 milligrams. And so one of the ways that we really reduce both the size and the power consumption is by using this technique called backscatter communication, where we communicate using reflected radio waves. And just to give a brief overview of how that works, let's say that you have this transmitting base station and a receiving base station that are plugged in somewhere and have plenty of power. One of the things that you can do here is that if you have an antenna connected to a switch that's toggling between two states on and off, you can actually change the reflection at that antenna and use that to communicate data to your receiver. And the cool thing about this technique is it consumes hundreds to thousands of times less power than a typical radio that you would find on your phone. And you can also implement that with very few components, with just a little microcontroller that's toggling this switch on and off, and that's connected to a switch and an antenna. And this is the same core technology that's used in things like RFID, and oftentimes that's limited to a couple of meters because your reflections are pretty weak and your antennas add additional loss. But one of the things that we've been able to do is by emulating techniques like LoRa, we can actually enable reception at much longer ranges of say like 50 meters or so in some of our most recent work. And the cool thing is by really reducing the amount of power that's required for these sorts of systems, we can even make them battery free, where here we have an example of a little battery free wireless sensor that we designed. This is again measuring things like temperature and humidity. And in another version of this, we actually included an accelerometer and magnetometer on this as well. And so, if we can carry a little bit more weight, also, I want to talk briefly about what we can do in terms of radio tracking of these invasive Asian giant hornets that were discovered here in Washington State. And this is work done with the Washington State Department of Agriculture. So these hornets are the Asian giant hornet, or the murder hornet, is this carnivorous species that's a major threat to bees. And the worry is that this invasive species is really going to establish itself here in Washington and be a big threat to native pollinators. And so what we did was we developed this tiny radio tracker that we could actually attach to the back of a live hornet. And what you see here is the process of actually attaching one of these little radio tags to a hornet. We sedated it by cooling it down. And you can see Chris from WSDA here attaching this little radio tag onto the back of the hornet. And by using these little tags, we were actually able to track a hornet back to its nest. The core idea of how this worked is very similar to the sorts of VHF tags that we saw before, but in this case, just really shrinking them down to the absolute smallest size. And with this, we were able to actually find a nest. And one of the cool things that we're trying to do going forward is adding new sensors to this tag. Again, things like an accelerometer, right? Or even just simple environmental sensors to figure out when the insect is actually inside its nest and how long its foraging trips are. And the last thing that I want to comment on briefly is, the little camera that we put on a live beetle. I'll skip past some of the details here, but we actually take some inspiration from how vision is very power expensive on live insects as well, where their visual systems consume huge amounts of both mass and processing power. And so inspired by that, what we actually did in this system was we actually developed a really low power way to be able to move the camera. So then we can use a fairly low or a lower resolution camera and then like expand our field of view, just like real animals can look around. I've got a video here showing the camera attached to a live beetle, and what you can see here is it's streaming data to a smartphone. This is actually triggered by an accelerometer as well, and with that we were able to use to get record for much longer amounts of time, basically again triggering a sequence of frames or capturing a sequence of frames whenever the animal started moving. And maybe in the interest of time, I'll stop there and would be happy to take any questions.
This was fantastic, and you're getting some excited comments from the chat. I will pass to Andreas in a second, but I have two questions first. One is kind of echoing Emma's comment that microtechnology is such an under-tapped resource for conservationists. I was just wondering how like you're doing such interesting, able to ask such interesting questions and do cool work. How broadly applicable is this to beyond the academic sphere? Who else has access? Yeah, how accessible is it?
Oh yeah, one of the really cool things about the kind of the approach that we've been taking using these basically programmable chips, the same sorts of things that have been developed for consumer devices, is we can easily adapt these systems to lots of different applications, right? We can connect. I showed you cameras. We can connect microphones, accelerometers, lots of different kinds of sensors to various different combinations of computing chips and radios, right? And so what the applications that I showed here are specific to like wildlife tracking type things, right? We could also use these same sorts of technologies for really any kind of low power wearable sensor or other types of medical technologies as well.
Awesome. So the second part of my question was where, like I said, we're all mind blown, and we're just wondering what's the next thing on your agenda and your horizon. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, so we've got lots of exciting ideas going on from here. I've got another part of my lab working on building small robots that use these technologies, but also lots of people have reached out interested in in using these in for studying a variety of different species like hummingbirds. We have a partner on campus who is interested in studying, again, foraging in hummingbirds, right? We want to get a little accelerometer on a hummingbird so that we can use that to, again, track its motion, different types of behaviors, right? We have another partner here at UW who is studying, she's really interested in how wildfire smoke here in the state, when we have wildfires, how that's affecting wildlife. And so, we're interested in some questions there around, like, can we put a little air quality sensor on this animal, on something like a mule deer, right? That they've already got some of these species radio collared, combining that air quality data with movement data to figure out how or what some of the impacts of wildfire smoke are.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to throw to a couple of questions. Andreas, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Vikram. Thanks. So this is super exciting for me. It's not the first time I hear you talk. So I've spent a lot of time, like Roland in '95, pulling frogs in the forest, and I really agree that it's not just insects, that there's all these small invertebrates, pretty much all amphibians, all small mammals, small birds that move at the smaller scale, a few hundred meters. But there's pretty much no tools for tracking other than running behind them so far. So given these tools that you're developing, before we even go into piling up different sensors, what do you think are the near future perspectives of having some sensor node system to really detail track the movements? I know that there's a couple of systems that have been used with radio tags, but all of them seem more of like engineering challenge currently than an actual deploy system that could be deployed in the field.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, maybe I'll go back to how we designed the system for tracking the Hornets, right? So in that case, again, because we were deploying this, we actually didn't really know where we were going to catch one of these, right? Ended up being like in the middle of a forest, like really close to the Canadian border. And so what we did there was we built our system in that case with very similar to, like I mentioned, traditional VHF tags where you have like some kind of antenna, and we had a bunch of people there that could run around with those, right? And we were really just trying to track that one hornet, and we had some idea of the region that it was going to be in. But the other thing that you could do is you could deploy static nodes that have static receivers, right? Or you could also use a drone with a receiver, right, to be able to automate gathering that data. I think it depends a little bit on what you're trying to do, right? I'm also, or again, I think I saw one of the questions in registration about using technologies like LoRa, right? For species that are, slightly larger than some of the insects, we could actually get pretty reasonable battery life, I think, with LoRa transmitters attached to them, and then you can actually do tracking over like kilometer scale areas, right? We could also think about approaches like, for anyone who's familiar with AGPS, like assisted GPS, where you have some device that gives the GPS receiver a little bit of information to start with, that can significantly reduce the amount of power that it takes to get your GPS lock. And so that's another approach that you could use there.
All right, I'm going to read out a question from Svenja. How are the images and video files stored? Are there small memory cards in the devices, or are they directly sent to a phone or other device like shown in the video? And if they are directly streamed, what is the range of which this works?
Great question. So on the camera that I showed here on the Beetle, that we were actually directly streaming raw uncompressed data, because it actually on the little chip that we were using, it ended up being slower to do something like JPEG compression rather than just streaming the raw data. But I think this is also a really interesting opportunity for future work. In terms of distance we were communicating at, we could go up to about 100 meters there, and still receive images. As you go further and further, you get lower frame rate, right? Because your wireless throughput starts going down. But yeah, this is where I think that there are lots of interesting opportunities to be able to implement things like whoops. So if you can implement some, like better compression on board, or even like some type of intelligent processing of those images, like recognizing a particular thing that you want to see, right? We can or making sure that's in your image, like like if you're foraging for food, that there's actually some object there, right? Then you could use that to store some images on the device.
Awesome. And one final question for you before I bring everyone back in. Emma asks, is this nanotech typically more expensive or cheaper to deploy?
Yeah. So one of the things here is also that a lot of these, or by making these systems physically small, they're often fairly cheap to build. You can think that it would be, and we're again using commercially available parts like the cameras and radio chips. So so I think that there's a lot of potential to really scale down costs there.
Awesome. I might invite all of our speakers back and move us into open discussion. Roland, Melinda, Yuki's already here, Vikram. The first question I wanted to throw, and this goes for everyone in the audience as well. If you've got questions for the group, please use the chat to throw them in, and thinking about, where is this field heading, and what advances are on the horizon, and what actually does advancement look like. And I think this is the basis of my question for everyone. I'd love to hear a discussion. I think we've got a pretty good handle on the immediate needs about costs and how we can incrementally improve the technologies and allow ourselves to ask questions. But what does advancement actually look like to all of you? Roland, I might throw to you first.
Sure, thanks. I guess, from my point of view as a user of technology and sort of, not one who's actually doing the soldering myself, I see that the challenges of taking some of these sort of cutting edge things like Vikram just talked about and getting it into mass production and getting it, into making it economical and making it something that can be used, it can be used by a lot of people, but then at the same time, the companies that do this, and maybe this is a question for Melinda, doing that R&D and then getting it into production is such a challenge to sort of stay at the cutting edge. And we all want that next thing that we saw that worked once for somebody, but making that, work at a big scale requires a lot of engineering and a lot of testing. And so I guess I see I feel like there's a lot that we're not doing the research and getting the cutting edge and then making it mass produced and making it available for the consumer. I saw Ron Nathan on here. I think he talked once about the death valley of innovation or something like that, of that things get stuck in there. And I see a lot of products, sort of stuck there. So I guess it's a long-winded answer, but I feel like getting things from something that's cool that worked in a couple cases in as a one-off to something that's usable by the whole field is a real challenge.
Melinda, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, I could answer that. And thanks, Roland, for recognizing that. It is a real challenge for us, because even though we talk about available for the whole field, this is just a small percentage when you look at commercial devices where you can have economies of scale. So one is, we really don't have the economies of scale when we're making hundreds or even 1,000 devices when you compare to, say, an Apple Watch, where you would be making hundreds of thousands of them. So we don't see that. The other piece is, because the technology changes so quickly, we can't use some of the techniques to make things very repeatable. And the third thing too is, and Roland, you touched on it, it is the reliability part of it. When you buy a smartphone and it doesn't work, you just go back to the shop and get it fixed. if you put a tag on an animal and release it, you really want nearly 100% reliability, and that adds to the cost. I'm not sure what the answer is to that. I know there is a tremendous amount of pressure to reduce the costs of tags, and it is driven by the cost of R&D and the cost of we call it commercialization. One of the suggestions I have is perhaps seeking some sort of external funding to help alleviate that cost or spread it across more of the community. So somebody who has a really cool tag that we perhaps only make 20 a year, it can be as affordable as some of the higher volume tags. So we are looking again at other sources of funding to help support that, be it from governmental institutions or even industry. Just quickly on there, the need for more tags for environmental impact studies. Well, this is also industry. The energy industry really needs that, and perhaps they should take some of their proposal money in building it and include enabling the researchers with their research cruises and all, and the technology providers such as us to bring that down to something a bit more affordable.
We've seen that impact in other areas of conservation tech. I'm just thinking of the talks that we've had about and experts we've had from the marine acoustics world, and how a lot of their innovation has been funded and pushed along because of the environmental impact requirements, and that driving innovation rather than it just being conservationists asking questions. So yeah, it seems one avenue for pushing innovation along. Yuuki or Vikram, I was wondering if you had some thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, maybe to add on to some of the comments that Melinda and Roland just made, I think that there definitely there's always this gap between like something that's been demonstrated in research once and then commercializing that, right? I think there's also this space like coming from the research side where, oftentimes we as researchers will, or particularly in engineering, will like develop one thing, right? We can write a paper on that, but then there's like work that needs to be done in between where that's like not necessarily academically interesting in terms of like developing new capabilities for us on the engineering side, but important work that needs to be done to really improve robustness and things, right? Like Melinda mentioned, to really get that to a place where industry could adopt it. And I think that also like Melinda mentioned, a great way to be able to do this is to find funding sources there that are really targeted at that technology transfer that could help address that that gap of economies of scale that you do have for consumer electronics, right? Where you could put some money behind this to start solving some of those challenges.
Yuuki, did you have any thoughts?
In my point of view, there is a large gap between data logging and satellite transmitting. So data logging, in data logging, the device must be recovered, and the recording duration is only typically for a few days, but we have very detailed data. And satellite telemetry, the recording duration is up to years, and they cover huge geographical range, and there is a big gap between two methods. And what I think we really need improvement for satellite telemetry, so that we don't need recover the logger. So I really agree with Melinda, and hoping to the improvement for satellite telemetry to get more useful data from a range of animals.
Thank you. Rand, did you want to jump in? And then Lars, I'm going to call on you. You are still muted.
Okay, now
there we
you
go.
can hear me now. Okay, great initiative, really. Yeah, really cutting edge works, and thank you everybody for sharing with us these wonderful technologies. I would like to address the question of the future goals and how to reach them. And I think it's mostly a combination of real interdisciplinary work and money. And the two go together. I can share with you my experience. For many years, I wanted to develop something like Atlas, the new system that we developed, and I couldn't find the right partner until I found Sivan Toledo from Tel Aviv University under a long grant of Minerva Center that was secured for 12 years. So this combination of long-term funding and a good partner enabled us to develop the system. It took us, it's already 10 years now. And only 2 years ago, we started to publish the research papers from these systems. So if we could find good partners that can tolerate the differences between disciplines, which are quite huge, and we can find funding for that, I think the motivation from the research, basic research and applied science is quite big to enable this kind of works.
Can I ask a blunt question of Melinda and Ran? You've both talked about we need funding. How much funding do you need? Like what sort of scale are we talking about? Like and on like what project level?
I guess you hit that there on what scale, what project levels. And that's one of the things that we really work hard at is what is really achievable and where can you get the most bang from the buck for the buck. And what we like to do is to work with partners who have specific questions that need to be answered. That does drive conservation efforts, mitigation efforts, and try to scale it into something that we call it time boxing, that is achievable within a set budget and a set time frame. So it's kind of a bit of a chicken and the egg. It's how much time and how much money, then we can tell you what can be accomplished in that period. So it's an iterative process, but the scale of money we're talking is actually in the millions of dollars. It's in the somewhere in the $5 to $10 million range. And that takes a concept from working with the user community to really understand what the requirements are, building, and then not only the designing and building, where we spend a lot of time is validation. Yuuki mentioned the validation of the accelerometry data with the camera data to detect these events. When we bring on new techniques, for example, AI ML is the big buzzword now, but there's also really more sophisticated deterministic algorithms, but they all need to be validated. As Yuuki said, we can get them on the satellite tags, but we want to be able to prove that what we're transmitting is really reflection of what was of the event. And that also takes a significant amount of time. In reality, the hardware is a very small piece of the cost of developing a tag. It's the brain power that goes in behind it to come up with the innovative thoughts. And it's not just wildlife computers, it's all across this community. And then it is the cost of actually doing the deployments and validating.
Yeah, I would agree with this. I'll just give you some numbers. The Minerva Foundation gave us about $2 million for this project, and many other projects supported by other research funding were actually used for, and by all means, the main component of this investment is manpower. at all levels, those that develop, those that test, that validate, and maintain the systems. It's by far the largest part.
Mm-hmm. Lars, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you very much for the initiative. You can hear me all?
Yep.
Yeah, good. No, I was just, yeah, it's along the same lines. How do we get this great stuff accessible? And some of these things that I put in the notes or in the chat that I probably why you called me is because there are some examples of stuff being very accessible by these group gets where these amazing guys from Audio Moth, they are producing audio lovers and they are producing them as people want to buy them. And also the Open Color initiative is similar in a way. And all this is open source hardware, so you can also build it yourself if you want to, but they will also build it and make not a business to make a lot of money, but a business to make it available.
I think there's a question around open access, and Roland, actually yours kind of ties in there as well. Do you want to jump in?
Well, sure. I guess I was kind of wondering, I know a lot of companies are always, the R&D is expensive and they're reluctant to jump into new technologies because it might be a black hole. But I guess I was wondering, do you think sort of tag companies could come up with a set of R&D priorities that are widespread across the field, and then that could be funded at like an independent lab and then made sort of open source, publicly available? Would that kind of thing be useful to speed the rate that Melinda, your company, and maybe other companies can get new tech into production?
Okay, yes, and this is a multifaceted question, and I would like to address one piece that I have to say is a sore point for Wildlife Computers is we make a lot of money. We actually support a staff of almost 70 employees, and they're highly skilled engineers, highly skilled technicians who assemble this. We have a QC staff and such. So the profit, most of our profits, and I will say this, honestly, with a hand on my heart, goes to further R&D and to enable the technology to be reliably available. So it is on manpower. But the other piece about open source and people building their own transmitters, I think this is a very good way to push the technology and to recognize in perhaps a less, in an environment that is more tolerant of failure and having to repeat the experiment, to kind of shake out some of the early bugs first, and then we can help then move that forward. It's very difficult for us to offer something that people pay for, that is commercially available, that we aren't fairly certain that it's, you never hit 100% reliability, but you do hit, we aim for 98%. And to be able to experiment, build your own tags, experiment with the different algorithms to prove that they're actually collecting the information that you need, that's a great partnership for us. And we've done that in the past with other academic institutions and researchers to help move that piece along.
I think this is a bigger question. We're talking about production pipelines, and the bigger question is how to collaborate and how to successfully collaborate between academia, conservation field end users, and commercial entities and individual engineers, and what sort of collaborations are possible and what makes them successful, right? And that recognizing there's very different roles for people to play. I wonder if it's one of the things that has come through in a lot of the research we've done is just the value of collaboration and how much willingness and the weight of importance our community's putting on it, that the only way forward is for us all to collaborate. I wonder, Yuuki and Vikram, if you could speak to your experiences coming from academia and engineering, working with different partners, and what's successful and what are the challenges that you've seen?
So I think that I think there are many success collaborations in animal tracking world. But my point of view is that most of collaboration work is focusing on horizontal tracking data. So I think there are much potential to organize an international collaborating team to focus on other metrics such as predator-prey interactions or three-dimensional habitat use and so on. So I think there are many potential for such a collaboration involving companies.
Yeah, maybe another comment that I'll add there is, so from the engineering side, and it's really important for us to partner with people actually working on these real problems, right? To figure out what what systems we should be building, what we should be optimizing for. And I think the one other opportunity that I'll add there for potential collaboration going forward is this idea that we were just talking about developing like an open source platform where particularly if you've got like two research teams where you're trying to solve a specific problem, you can build out a proof of concept there, right? Showing that this thing will work. Then that's a sort of thing where once you have some you've worked out some of the bugs there, shown that you can actually make the device more reliable, then that's something that a company like Wildlife Computers or others could actually build up at larger scale, right? So that you de-risk some of that initial development, and then that's something that maybe could be made more widely available to the community.
I wanted to pick up there was a conversation earlier, and it's been a thread in the chat throughout the event around standards. Talia, who was the person that, A. Robson asked about standards. A. Robson, what's your first name, and do you have a mic? Do you want to jump in? Oh, there you are. What is your first name?
It's Andrew.
Andrew, okay, that's better. Andrew, do you want to jump in?
So it's really, I think it's come around to the talk of using this collaboration, reusing various bits of tech. So like we've talked about before, if you can reuse the same thing in multiple places, then the cost reduces. So in terms of making that interoperability, I wondered whether there was any standard or standardization, and whether that should be something that we could get a set of standards, and then that way various people can collaborate and build their own tags and they all adhere to the standards, and then you can interoperably use them or switch them out or things like that.
Christian, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. I put a little note in the chat that there is a working group of the International Biologging Society that works specifically on the real challenge of data standardization. And there were also comments about other initiatives like Anibos with whom we are interacting. So I think that is a topic we need to solve quite urgently as a community, and there are efforts underway. So if anybody's interested in joining the society's work on this, I would be happy to connect them. And if I may, I have a comment that relates to this interoperability topic and what we just discussed about developing tags that can be widely available to the community. I wonder whether it's useful to think about modular systems where we think about the technology that needs to be developed that is then widely applicable across taxonomic groups and research contexts, and then develop separately to that the attachment modules, which are highly idiosyncratic for different species and different questions. So I know that a lot of development goes into developing particular tags for birds or for terrestrial mammals and so on, but perhaps it's useful, and I would like to hear the panel's views on that, to think about the main technologies we as a community have a need for across systems and questions, and then separate that from the challenges of attaching them to our chosen study species and packaging them and finding the right configurations. So maybe that's a useful way to think about the problem.
Does anyone want to pick that up?
Yeah, maybe I can start with a couple of comments there. You know, I think that is something that where you know, you really do have a kind of common, or at least kind of on the hardware side, you do have a common set of things that you need to do, where if you have like a logging tag, right, then you have issues of like being able to store data in memory, right, or like some kind of sensor tag or location tag, right. There is often a core piece of technology there that can be used in other systems. One thing that I'm kind of interested in finding out from you guys is if there is some kind of common platform there. Like a few folks have mentioned to me, like having some kind of subgram data logger or tracking device could be or is something that could be used on a wide variety of species, right? And if you could then and if that's a problem that is really relevant to the community, then that's something where, you know, we can focus on building that piece, right? And then of course or at least the core engineering parts of that, and then that's something that could be adapted to a wide variety of different animal tracking problems.
Can I just jump in with a follow-up as this as well? So this is kind of the thoughts of why I was asking the question. We've done this in another industrial application where there's very standard building blocks, if you like Lego, and you build it together so it fits that particular application and it works well. But that's obviously an external area. So it's how do we get that into the biologging sphere?
Can I mention something too? That there is the basic hardware platform, as Vikram mentioned, the sensors, the data logging, and even as Yuuki mentions, the telemetry, how you do that. But what is the bigger unknown are the algorithms that we want to use, and to prove them both, you know, on the desktop, in the cloud, what kind of data fusion's needed. And this is why we've been working with the data standards group as well. How do we fuse our data together to be able to provide that information? That needs all to be done upfront before we look about putting them onto tags. And that is where we've often found it's difficult to get the across the board community agreement. And if we could do that, I do believe will really help. A very simple example is what kinds of location, how do we classify location accuracy and resolution, and come up with some standards on that. And Christian, I'm sure you know, you've been fighting some of that, is what is an Argos versus, you know, a class 3 versus a class 1 versus a acoustic proximity location versus the different flavors of GPS that's available for answers. How do we standardize that? How do we set some goals for that can be applied across all species? And I think we as manufacturers look to the community to help answer that question.
Okay, I'm conscious we're powering towards half past, so I've only got a little time left, and I wanted to just ask, pose a question to the panel, a final question to hear your thoughts, and just I'm curious to know, what's the #1 development on the horizon that you think would completely revolutionize what we're doing right now? And, you know, what's making you feel optimistic as well? Yuuki, do you want to go first?
Yeah, as I mentioned, acceleration triggered camera or a smart type camera is is a big hope, big potential.
And what's making you feel optimistic? What's making you feel hopeful for the future?
Yes. So such kind of camera allow us to what animal are doing in the water, in the sky, or on the ground, or so we have more better view of what animals are doing.
Awesome. Vikram, what's exciting you on the horizon and what's making you feel optimistic?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm really interested in is like increasing availability and accessibility of satellite technologies, and the fact that we actually have radio links now that can communicate across such large distances. Are there, new types of systems that we can build there, where a lot of the work that I talked about was, trying to do like logging on a tag, like ground-based systems. If again, like being able to, particularly coming from the background of actually trying to build these things, being able to get a custom satellite up, and working with some of these organizations that have larger networks that are being deployed, that's really exciting for me.
Awesome. Melinda.
There we go. It's the ability to do onboard processing. And it's not, and it is actually, it ties into the more sophisticated algorithms that are being done to analyze the big data that are collected. And I think we're gaining a lot of insights by fusing observational data with, say, for accelerometry, so we can detect events. But I just think that the field is really moving ahead quite quickly with a lot more potentials on how can we use and pull information out of all these data points that are being collected.
Awesome. And Roland, do you like the final word?
Well, I really like the last two responses. So I agree with both of those, and maybe I'll the work that I do is more on the analytical side than personally, and the data management side than on the making devices side. So I guess I kind of echo what Melinda said, and maybe lead into the next of these sessions, which is, I think the more we can streamline and automate the analyses, the more we can sort of standardize those so that they are repeatable and that they are easy to use, and that you don't need, because there's so much complication in some of these that I think we need to work more and more to sort of building them into repeatable pipelines and workflows that can be then repeated with somebody else's data set, maybe tweaked a little bit without necessarily starting from scratch. So I think that's where, and the more we have more and more different types of data, the data fusing them together also adds to the complexity, but also to the potential.
Thanks. Thank you to all of our speakers today. It was fascinating to hear your work on different scales and different species, and from such different perspectives. So we're really delighted that you joined us at 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. It was going beyond the call. This is just the first in 4 sessions. So the next session will pick up on a lot of the questions that were, the next few will pick up on a lot of the questions and themes that were coming up in the chat and actually in the discussion today. So this is just the first part of this conversation. So please do join us in 2 weeks, where we will talk about data analysis. And I think we'll be delving a lot more into the AI and the onboard processing side of things and where we're going with that. So please do join us. And if you're not a member of Wild Labs, just so you're aware, we have an online community, and these events are just part of what we do. So if you're excited by this meeting of cross-disciplinary folk, this is exactly what we do in our online community. And we will be launching our new platform next week, fingers crossed. So go and join the community at WILDLABS.NET. We're there to support you guys. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you very, very soon.